Fala pessoal do Sharpcast, sejam muito bem-vindos ao nosso 15º episódio. Hoje eu vou tocar o nosso programa aqui com o nosso querido amigo e parceiro, Cheque, lá de Portugal. Se apresenta aí pro pessoal, Cheque.
Olá pessoal, mais uma vez aqui junto com vocês, obrigado. Vocês já me vão conhecendo, eu vou fazer agora cada vez mais aqui alguns episódios aqui com o pessoal do Sharpcast. É um prazer estar aqui e vamos aqui então ao nosso próximo convidado. Vamos falar aqui um bocado sobre odds e modelização e preços.
Show de bola. Antes da gente chamar o nosso próximo convidado desse episódio de hoje, vamos falar do nosso patrocinador. A Betbra, vocês já conhecem, que é a nossa parceira aqui, que já apareceu nos episódios passados. Ela funciona como o espelho da Pinnacle e da Betfair, né? Tem uma funcionalidade muito bacana de autoplanilhamento das suas entradas lá na Betbra, vale a pena conferir. A gente vai deixar um QR Code aqui na tela, em algum lugar aqui da tela, para vocês irem lá dar uma olhadinha, e é só vantagem, viu?
Questions will be how it all began like 30 years ago, because I think historic memory is important, and we tend to be a product maybe of our childhood and the environment, something like that, and you can explain to the listeners.
I mean, things are very different in the UK at any rate, because we've changed from legalization in the early 1960s, whereas sports betting was only legalized in Brazil in 2018 and only regulated late last year, early this year. I'd read the backstory of the popularity of betting in Brazil and how it just took a long time to come to fruition. But we have been through a long evolution in terms of how the product is delivered to us, and that started on the high street really in 1961. Telephone betting, racecourse betting, and I suppose I'm that old. Really, my first serious involvement would have come whilst, like many young men, whilst I was at university, and I happened to go to a university where I didn't do much work. There wasn't much. Didn't have much time to study. Lots of time on my hands. We had a horse racing course nearby, and so that sort of piqued my interest. So horse racing was really the first thing that got me involved. I was quite a lazy person. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living as well. I had a girlfriend at the time that was interested in horse racing. We go to the races. I would have a few bets, and come the end of my degree, I started to work as a bookmaker's clerk on the race course because I had no money. So that kept me interested. And then, of course, we're going to talk about this in due course, how the internet has changed things. But you would see adverts in the trade papers, specifically the Racing Post, as it was at the time, for jobs and so forth. And so I got a job working as a broadcaster for Coral, who are one of the three big bookmaking chains in the United Kingdom at that time. My degree was in French, and I happened to be working as a French broadcaster there. That was in 1991, I think, or 1990, possibly 1990. That was funny enough when I met John Wright for the first time. And it suddenly made me realize actually there was more to betting than just horse racing. There were other sports, not a great deal of other sports, and football was the only real player in town. But it made me think, actually, I've got a job here as a broadcaster. I'm quite interested in this. How can I put off real work for as long as I could? And it turned out it wasn't very long. My dad said, "Oh, you should get a proper job," and I was bored of that after a year. So I applied speculatively for a job with the Jockey Club and Weatherby's, who were administering British horse racing at the time. That was in 1992. I had still no idea what I wanted to do. I was 23, 24 by that time. and basically made it up as I went along. I had a great passion for a couple of sports, boxing and snooker, and occasionally bookmakers would offer prices on these things, and I'd look at them and in a very naive way and think I knew what I was doing. And one day I wrote to I wrote to all three of what were the only big bookmakers at that time, because there was no email in those days, no internet. So I wrote with pen and paper to Ladbrokes, Corals and William Hill. The chap from Ladbrokes wrote back and said he lived near me. It was in southeast London at the time. We met up, and that's all she wrote. I ended up getting a job with the Ladbrokes in 95, 96, I think it was. And the journey has continued, and here we are nearly 30 years later. So that's it in a very small nutshell.
Well,
and I can make it longer, but I don't think your audience would be that.
No, it's perfect.
So that's how it started. That's the start of the journey. And I think, like a lot of people, no one is born saying I want to work in this industry. You gravitate to it, and possibly to many other types of jobs, through a bit of luck, a bit of chance, an opportunity, and taking it. But yeah, I had no great plan. Funnily enough, when I met John Wright for the first time, I thought, I admire what he does. I wish I could do that. And it turns out that's pretty much what I ended up doing. But yeah, lots of twists and turns in between.
I want to know something about you. How much the art of odds making, as we can say like that, evolved over these 20 years of experience?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I had a good because I knew this question was coming, and I had a good think about this. Now, if you're an old timer like me, you're going to say, well, we were better then at what we did than we are now. That's not necessarily true. I think we are actually, because I'm talking about nearly 30 years now, we're better at making predictions now because we have more information. So the evolution is not around the art in and of itself. The biggest change has been the availability of information. And my dad always used to say to me, well, look, the person that's going to do best in this world is the person that's got the information. It's not about something tangible that you can hold or make in an industry. He told me that it's the information that is going to be valuable, as opposed to, I don't know, a piece of hardware or a product that you're making. And if you think about it now, of course, the industry nowadays is beholden to information suppliers and owners. Think of Stats Perform, Opta, IMGA, all the rights holders in various sports and disciplines, and all the free sites, of course, with stats available at a touch of a button. And I think that's something that your listenership or your viewership should understand, because pre-internet, and we're talking as far as the gambling industry is concerned, really around the turn of the millennium, around 1999, 2000. I can remember sitting at Ladbrokes as we did then, round a table with newspapers, magazines. That's where we got our information. There was no global supplier of information, and we were after bits and pieces of information that would lead us to a better guess, if you like. And we were having just a slightly more educated guess than our customers. I'll give you one example. The Tour de France, none of us were cycling experts. So we would go off and buy Tour de France magazine, Cycling Weekly, Cycling Monthly, or whatever, and read as much as we can. And in the context of our jobs, obviously we've got a lot to do in a short space of time. And that's how we do it, you know. And so it's the person that is equipped with the best information that is able to make the best decisions. Now that information allows us nowadays, because there's so much of it, to better understand what we're doing. So we've got more of an idea about what we're doing, because we can tackle our uncertainty with cold hard facts. Does that sort of make sense? So we had good guesses in those days, but were we better odds makers? No. But we had a good feel for it on the basis of the limited information that we had. So as much as everyone likes to hark back to the old days, were things better then? Perhaps they were more fun, but by no means will be any better.
I would like to touch a little bit again in that topic, because I think I would like you to touch on something, because when you were odds making, when you were making lines, you were making a product, you were building a product, and you need that product to be sold. You need people to actually buy and bet those lines. So your efficiency, when you say we are much better now making predictions, we have more information, but you have the same problem. You have maybe better tools now, but you still need the product to be sellable, I think. I'm not sure if that's what you meant when you say you were. So the art of odds making for you, is it more important for you to make a line that is robust, knowing you that the market will shape that line, or to do a line that is sellable?
Well, I guess it depends what angle you come at it from. In the last 7 or 8, maybe 9 years now, I've run my own business teaching people how to be odds makers. And really, you do want to come up with something that is sensible. We're never going to know what the true price, what the real price of anything is, really. But if I can explain to people, either to people, or if I'm having a bet myself, or working on behalf of somebody else, if I can come up with a line that makes sense on the basis of all the information that I have, then I've achieved my job. Now, as for making it sellable, positioning yourself in the market is obviously very important. But if you're a big company with a large customer base, people are liable to bet on something if you make it 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 10 to 1. If it's there, people will bet on it. And if you have a good customer base, then they'll find you easily enough. So I think the thrust of what I'm trying to say nowadays is I just try to make the price the best that I can make it. And if other people disagree or have a different opinion, that's fine. It's just their opinion. I just do the best that I can do. Who knows if if I'm better or worse than anybody else, or if I'm right or they're wrong. It's just my work, and that's how I come up with it. So I think nowadays, though, you were talking about the art of odds making. All that information still requires somebody to be able to process it and look at it and say, well, what are the important bits here? What are the bits that I can miss out? What are the bits that get me closer to the answer that I think I'm looking for? And so, although we'll never know what the true probability of something is, how we feel about all that information at the end of the day is expressed in a price. How we feel about it and how confident we are is a measure of how well you've done the job, I think.
I guess there's another thing about that too, because you said like nowadays with the internet and network, everything, it's easier to get some information, right? But more people get this information too, because it's more easier. So you need to know if the market don't move it yet with this information. Sometimes you receive the information after everybody already staked in the market, so there's no value more on this kind of play,
Yeah, and there's a line of thought that says, well, whatever the market says it is as accurate a price as it can be at that given moment in time. I remember being at university, and my teacher, I said to my teacher, there's a £10 note. I think there's a £10 note over there on the floor. I'll go and pick it up. And he says, it's probably not a £10 note, because if it was, somebody would already have acted on that and picked it up themselves. So you have all the information that everybody else has. So it's very likely that the market is fairly efficient. I think the best way for you to test, not that you're ahead of the market, but whether you are going to be successful, is, if you're on the sportsbook side, is actually taking bets, and over the course of time, finding out if you're profitable, or if you're, on the other hand, if you're a bettor, and most of us are, experimenting with your theories. But again, and I say to everyone, you are not defined by one result or even a small section of results. This game is determined over what happens over a long period of time. And whether you're a bettor or an owner of a sports book, it's what's happening after months and years of results, not how good was my prediction on one particular event. So I think, I'd like to think that, 30 years of muddling through means I've just about held my own. So yeah, if you're a bettor and you want to know where to be in terms of confidence, then be prepared for the long haul. It's not a game that's decided in the short term.
Yeah, adverse selection is very powerful, and it's on our side. I think the bookie has to price hundreds of lines, and we can pick the one that, in theory, during the randomness of the event, will be more imprecise. I think I have a question for you related to more niched than this odds making. I think you have made prices for events with very short data. For instance, boxing. Professional boxer boxed maybe 30-40 professional matches during his lifetime. So I think for this type of events, you need to have much more than newspaper. So what are the tools that you apply? What it's the methodology? If you can talk a little bit about this, because I'm saying this because in Brazil there are many fighters in the MMA.
Yeah,
I've been asked for so many people. So I want to create a model. And I said, okay, what do you want to model? Oh, I want to model MMA. And I said, oof, okay, model MMA. These guys do practically the same matches than a professional fighter, and it's not easy. So I think if you could throw some ideas on this.
Yeah, I mean, I love MMA almost as much as I love boxing nowadays, because professional boxing is not really the sport it used to be. Whereas in UFC and Bellator and so forth, it's a meritocracy. The best tend to fight the best, and usually the best come out on top. But even in those sports, Hugo, they are becoming data rich. Certainly in MMA, you've got strike percentages, takedowns, submissions, time on the floor, and so forth. Punch stats from CompuBox, for example, would be another area. But and I think, thinking back of how I was successful in coming up with good predictions for combat sports, it's just hard work. So in boxing, I'd go and buy videos from overseas, from the boxing magazines. I'd go to shows, amateur shows, professional shows, watch all the fights, watch the undercard, read absolutely everything that I could, because, and one of my former colleagues at Ladbrokes said something that resonated with me. He said, if you do an hour and a half's work on a sports event, whether it's a football match or a boxing match, certainly a boxing match, if you do an hour and a half's work on that, it's probably going to be an hour's more than the odds maker has done himself, because he's got so many other things to do. He's got so many tasks in his daily job. And that's certainly true in this day and age, where practically nobody does any of the work themselves. So it's not unreasonable to think if you do more work than the other guy, you're going to have a better chance. And it just so happened, boxing was, it's fairly mainstream now. Certainly in the UK, it was a minority sport back in the 90s and the 2000s. where you didn't have to do much more than the odds maker to have a significant advantage. And if you did a lot more, and I did a lot more because I loved the sport back then you'd have a huge advantage, allied to the fact that all the books were making their own prices in the 90s and the early 2000s, as opposed to getting it from an aggregated source, which would be a better long-term prospect. Then you had a great diversity of price, a much better chance of showing a profit, and as a means of distinguishing yourself, whether you were a bettor or an odds maker, as I was for all of that period. You could demonstrate your knowledge through your odds making capability just by hard work, really. So it's not very glamorous, but by and large, and I think this probably extends to all sports, the more you study your chosen discipline, the better you get at making good decisions and predictions.
And we can do a correlation on snooker too, right?
On snooker,
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I spent way too much of my time playing the game, but also going to the tournaments themselves, speaking to the players, watching all the matches that were off TV. Again, it just helps you make better predictions, which at the end of the day are just educated guesses. Yes, there are some probability distributions that we can all learn about that help you point in the right direction. But again, the harder you work, particularly at these minority sports, I've been looking at other things like table tennis and volleyball lately, and I'm thinking actually with these are sports that are not given the time of day in the way that football is. I wouldn't expect to beat football really in any way, shape, or form. But I do give myself a reasonable chance of being able to come up with good prices for these minority sports, just because I've got the time to study them a little bit more than the other people. So it doesn't come down to talent. It's really hard work, I think.
I have a question for you, and I'm very curious about your approach on this, because for me, as my understanding, we have two types or three types, different breeds of operations. You have the bookies who tend to price events. You have the so-called Asian bookies with the Pinnacle line. You have exchanges like Betfair who have enormous liquidity, so in game day they can bring a lot of predictability to the market. But I have something that is not very common in Brazil and not very common in Europe, besides England. That is this spreadex, and I have always understood that they were very efficient pricing events, maybe even so more than normal bookies, because they have to be. So my question for you is spreadex like a school of thought inside odds making, or it's only a myth and completely out of order what I'm saying?
No, I mean, there's certainly a grain of truth in that, and depending on how long you've got.
We have 5 hours.
All right, very good. Spreadex is one of a now rapidly dwindling number of spread betting companies. Now, spread betting companies really sort of took off in the early 1990s, early to mid 1990s. You had Sporting Index, who's actually subsequently been bought by Spreadex, City Index, IG Index, and I happen to work for two of those companies, IG Index and Sporting Index, and it's fair to say that they were and you'll have to excuse the dogs in the barking in the background. It was fair to say that they were the first people in the industry to start using mathematical models just a few years ahead of the fixed odds firms, and so they had just an earlier adoption of some of the basic probability principles, around Poisson, let's say, in football and so forth, and goal scoring rates and other bits and pieces. And when we were working in the fixed odds world, a lot of sports books would look for Sporting Index and latterly Spreadex that came up in the very late 1990s, if memory serves, early 2000s, because their prices, rather than being based around a median value, are based around a mean, an average, an arithmetic mean, what we expect will happen in the long run. So, for example, in a game of football, instead of having over under 2.5 goals, they're going to have a middle point of 2.87 goals, and that will have been derived through their own processes, but it gives you a very accurate estimation of what they think the number of goals is on average. Now, I can remember my dad saying to me when I worked in spread betting, you can't have 2.87 goals in a game of football. I said, well, if you play 100 games of football and there are 287 goals, guess what? You've got 2.87 goals per game. So actually, the idea of averages is, as I said earlier on in the conversation, is a really good way of determining how likely something is. And of course, the notion that these spread betting firms had to offer a two-way price, which is something that fixed odds sportsbooks did not. So by and large, a firm might offer, 3-1 Manchester City to win their game, but they wouldn't offer 1-3 Manchester City to lose or draw. In other words, not to win. That spread betting firm would offer 2.7 to 2.9 goals, and you could bet either side of that. The difference between the buy and the sell price was their overround, and they were ahead of the game for a few years, probably for 5 or 6 years. And one of the reasons why fixed odds betting caught up with them and surpassed them is that the fixed odds market started to recreate their creativity. Spread betting firms, and Spreadex was one of them, were very creative in terms of what they offered. Shirt numbers, for example, were not a betting market that fixed odds firms offered at all. The spread betting firms offer them. Bookings in particular, corners, none of this was offered by the traditional high street bookmaker. It was offered by the more agile internet only spread betting firms. And so, while imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, the fixed odds firms copied everything they did, and little by little spread betting has fallen by the wayside, mainly because that differentiation, that diversity of product has now moved out of the spread betting domain and into the fixed odds domain. I can remember, just by way of finishing, I did some work in the late 1990s with Ladbrokes, who had their own brief foray into spread betting. The fixed odds world were not ready for it at that time. Come the internet, globalization, huge amount of different sports, markets, depth and breadth of product. 10 years later, they were. And of course, Ladbrokes, instead of going back into spread betting, just stole all the ideas, just like all the other fixed odds firms, borrowed all the creativity of spread betting. And now that fixed odds product is as wide and deep as anything that spread betting has ever offered. So the fact that Spreadex survives, whereas pretty much everybody else has fallen by the wayside, is testament to their resourcefulness. But yeah, absolutely. But in a very large nutshell, yes, spread betting was a precursor to many things. In-play betting as well they were a driver of that. Fixed odds firms had no in-play betting, spread betting did, and of course cash out, which we know and love today in the fixed odds world, was invented really by sports spread betting, from financial spread betting, where you could buy and sell and open and close a position. Now you can do that in fixed odds betting. So we've come full circle. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They are and were a good indication of price accuracy. There. Does that make sense?
That makes beautiful sense. It's like a masterclass you are teaching us here. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you. I mean, I could wobble on, but I mean, your viewership wouldn't be that pleased about it. But I do have a lot of experience in spread betting, and I did work trading floor, and it's very hard. It's no harder or easier than in the round than fixed odds betting, because we face slightly different challenges. But by and large, and it might work somewhere else, but by and large, it was of its time in the early 2000s and late 1990s. But like all fads, Betfair was enormous when it came in the early 2000s. Perhaps less popular now. People move on, people adopt and adapt to other people's ideas. But yeah, certainly, if you're looking for a different approach to understanding pricing, then that would be an area to go to.
So I have a question about this this now. You said about football and soccer, about these corners and players should be booked or cards or something like that. There are markets that the book is created after a necessity, I guess, after they feel that they need more markets. And we can put it on NBA. We have hundreds of props markets on each game, to score anything and faults and everything like that. Do you think that nowadays this book has this price efficiency? Help me check.
Yeah.
With efficiency.
Yeah,
It's
your
hard to say.
Portuguese is better than my English. I can assure you. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and Brazil will find out, and America is finding out that props are wildly more popular nowadays than they were back in the day, and what you will know as same game parlays, we know over here as Bet Builder. There are now companies that sell that product because it is so data rich, and information again is so valuable around assists and points and 3-pointers and shots on target, for example, in soccer. It's going to extend to every conceivable sport because it's something that engages the player, something that engages the bettor, as being slightly more interesting than who will win the match. Actually, I've got an interest in this particular player rather than the team as a whole. I might have a view on LeBron James or in basketball, or a particular quarterback in NFL, let's say Josh Allen or someone like that. I think he's going to get, he's going to pass for this many yards in this game. I can now bet on this thing. There may be opportunities there for you, and I speak to a lot of people in Europe that assure me that they have a better understanding of, let's say, EuroLeague basketball than some of the providers out there, and where the players are going to play and how long they're going to play for and in what capacity, that there may still be an edge for the better. Yes, certainly more than you would find in simple spread and totals lines, which are going to be fairly robust. Yes.
Yes, and that's why they have low liquidity on this kind of market comparing to spreads or totals or
correct.
money
You can bet
lines.
thousands and unlimited on 1x2 or Buffalo minus 5.5 or whatever, but you try and get a bet on Garoppolo passing yards or for San Francisco or whoever he's playing for these days. So yeah, big and it's because there is less confidence around that price, and that's understandable. So from a bookmaker point of view, absolutely it's understandable, but from a bettor's point of view, again, it comes down to hard work. Have you got enough time and enough information to make a better guess than the sports book that probably doesn't have as much time on their hands as you do to come up with the same answer?
Yeah, and you mentioned about the bet builder. Here in Brazil, we have the culture of putting, I don't know, doing a parlay basically on the bet builder. You gather in some low odds to give you a bigger odds, But the mostly bettors here in Brazil, it's I'm almost sure that they don't know the book puts a huge vig on it, or juice. I don't know how you
That's
call
right.
it there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why they're so heavily promoted over here. That's why, I mean, I've been lucky enough to be around for a long time, but also remembering when and how Bet Builder came to pass. There was a company called Skybet, who are a big online firm over in the UK at any rate. And they were having, and I can remember this was late 2015, early 2016, which is when I started my own teaching business. They were getting a lot of questions through social media, through Twitter or whatever the channels were, from customers saying, can you provide me with a price for this, this, and this to happen in the football match? And of course, traditional algorithmic models that they were using did not supply them so that price readily. So they had a bank of people that were coming up with prices. So having an educated guess, that educated guess was servicing an ever increasing number of customers, to the extent that they started to have to build software to cope with it. And as income or as revenue came in, they realized just how big a product that would be. As far as other companies were concerned, I'm thinking in the UK of companies like Ladbrokes and Corals. They were slow to just realize how popular this was going to be. But fast forward 8 or 9 years, everyone's got them. It's a 20% product instead of a 5% product or whatever you're making on 1x2. That's why they're so popular. It's obviously had an effect in the United States. I imagine the same thing will happen in Brazil. Probably is happening because, of course, you have legal bookmakers, Bet365, Betano, and so forth. All have got their own presence in Brazil, all of whom are offering seemingly attractive odds, but absolutely no value. You know that, and we know that, but the customer doesn't know any better at the moment.
Yes, I agree with you on that, because it's so hard to get some expected value plus EV nowadays, and they put a lot of selections on a parlay and thinks that 1.80 odd it's cool for 10 selections, you know.
Yeah, but and that pastime, that way of betting is heavily ingrained in the culture, isn't it? And that's not something you're going to undo to the best of your ability through however many educational podcasts you do. We see it in the UK and have seen it for ever since the dawn of time. People having big priced accumulators, because that's the nature of, that's human nature. They want small stakes, big returns. They're not really bothered about small negative EV or even big negative EV. Where else are you going to be able to make that sort of money? It's by having one of those same game parlays. So good luck to them, I say. But yeah, as far as an attractive and long-term profitable betting proposition goes, not for me, thank you.
But for fun, I think it's okay, you know. So
yeah,
everybody knows what to do. It's fun to put 10 players to be booked, and you try to fight it out, you know. But they need
people
to know
will bet
that.
for many different reasons, and from a social point of view, and there are firms now that really want to attract the social bettor, the bettor that plays in 1, 2, 5, 10 pounds, something to entertain himself.
Yes,
And in actual fact, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but in the UK, bookmakers are now becoming conduits of entertainment. You're buying a piece of entertainment for £5 or £10, not with the expectation of getting something back, but you never know. And so, to that extent, the game has changed as well.
It should have some excitation to watch the game too on a parlay like that.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's cheaper than going out to your local bar for a few pints of beer, and you never. Occasionally, you might win as well. So in fact, I have no problem with however people want to spend their money, but that's just one of the more popular ways in which people do so these days.
Yeah, but this bet builder, you need to think that the books are putting it online now. Here in Brazil, we started with Bet365, later Betano put it too, and now mostly soft books have it, you know. So you need to know that they are putting it online. It's because it's good for them, you know. They are
Yeah.
not thinking about the customer only.
If the bookmakers had a product that didn't make them money, it wouldn't be around for very long. So,
Yes.
and in actual fact, we were talking about Bet Builder 7 or 8 years ago. We're still talking about it now, and when I go to these trade shows, and I'm sure we'll still be talking about it in 10 years' time, because they will find more and more diverse ways of presenting that product because it's so profitable to them.
I think I have another question here related now, because you open the door about your new job. You are helping others to be odds makers. You are teaching people how odds making business. And I'm remembering a sentence from a friend of mine from the UK. Sometimes he said to be the judge of judges. So my question, or my first question about this is, when you are with a group, a selected group of people that will be odds makers, do you teach them, or are you concerned, for instance, about those cognitive biases, recency bias? You talk about those psychological nuances that could help them or make them be worse or better odds makers, or you are just approaching to the mechanical and the other part of the equation, which is the mathematics on the dynamics of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, actually. And again, if by the way, how is your audience going to understand all this? Is it going to get translated, or do they
Yes,
answer the show?
we are going to put subtitles.
Also the title in Portuguese. Don't worry.
Muito obrigado, then. Thank you very much.
It's not an easy podcast we are doing here.
No. So I'll try and keep it simple. But again, if you've got the time, when I think back to when I first started thinking about odds compiling as odds making as a business, as a career, which would have been in the mid 1990s, there was no formal training around. You were, if you were lucky enough to get a job, you learnt very quickly through mistake making. I don't think anyone starts off as a really natural good odds compiler. You make a lot of mistakes, you leave a lot of money behind, whether it's personally or for the company, and you learn by repetition. It's probably like any other job. You learn through practice. But it did strike to me at the time, and I was working for Ladbrokes, who at the time one of the bigger betting outlets. There wasn't really any formal training in this job. If you knew sport, that was good, but no one sat me down and said, not told me anything really. And it got to a point, I think, where I thought, well, I was looking at the people around me, they're all really good, and I was thinking, well, how did they learn? Probably the same way I learned. And I thought there's got to be a better way, because it took me many years of making mistakes before I was able to say, I think I'm okay at this job. Latterly, I met and started people who were good at and started to study maths a little bit more. And it was almost by coincidence that when I was working for Sporting Index in the early part of the 2010s, we decided to create a training course for our staff by way of differentiating them from the rest of the industry. And I was tasked with putting this course together. And it sparked my interest in thinking, well, actually, we should be educating people in the skills of a job, because if you don't understand the product you're selling, then you've got a real problem. And I find this all the time, not just at trader level, but every single aspect of companies I work with. So it was almost by accident that I started to put this course together with the university in Salford, as it was. And by that time I'm so old now, I can't remember, 40 something. I don't know. And actually the difficulty as an odds compiler or as a trader, as we know it nowadays, is you're working evenings, you're working weekends, the long hours in an fairly unhealthy environment. And when you get to your late 30s, early 40s, you might have a wife and children, a family. You don't want to be spending evenings and weekends, as much as you like sport, away from them. And so the opportunity to shift into a non-trading but teaching capacity was quite appealing at the time. And I found out I was lucky enough that I could articulate ideas fairly well. I'd had a good relationship with the new technological side of industry, model creation and so forth. So I understood their methods. I understood my methods. I was sort of able to glue them together a little bit. And then one day, good friend of mine called Simon Trim said, well, I think you're pretty good at this. Have you ever thought about doing it more formally? And so I did. And I'm trying to think, 2015, I branched out on my own. Had, again, no idea whether anyone would need odds compilers or understand the need for odds compilers. Set up my own website, set up my own teaching services, and I never looked back. Been all over the world, and it sort of feeds into the idea that I think is right. People who are in the betting industry at every level still need to understand what they're selling. Odds making obviously is required skill for traders, but what about the people in product, in engineering, in software development, in marketing, higher up the food chain at board level? Why wouldn't you want to understand what it is you're selling? So in actual fact, I've taught operators, I've taught suppliers, I've spoken to people at every level, and having that domain knowledge, I think, is really useful. And so, yeah, I've been lucky enough to just make something out of nothing, really. And now I'm in my late 50s. I don't think I could go back on the trading floor. It's just too much hard work. But there we are. Does that answer your question? I can't remember what the question was.
The question was the correlation of it with cognitive biases, because I think we all have our own biases.
Yeah, okay. So I've actually gone off piste there a little bit, off topic. But when I do confront people, and of course, between 2016 and 2020, I was doing it before the pandemic came along. I was doing most of it face to face. And as somebody who's a little bit older than other people, I tried to think back to what I was like when I was in my 20s, and obviously I meet people in their late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and so forth, and think, well, what was I lacking then that I need, that I would have loved to have had that I can provide now? And so the ability I have, I think, is to be able to equip these young men and women with a way to understand how they feel about pricing. And what I mean by that is some simple probability, some simple mathematics, and a way to capture what you think and feel about a sports event with just common sense. And let me say to all your listeners and viewers in Brazil, I was terrible at maths at school. But probability is one small section of mathematics, and it happens to be a really easy section. And if you can grasp that, then you can add some common sense to the biases that you're talking about, to the feelings. And you might have a feeling that a certain player is going to perform well, or a team, and that team or player may be a big price or a short price. But if you have some common sense, logic, and mathematics that can support or deny that bias, that idea that you have, then that's going to put you in good stead. And so if you think something that's really unlikely to happen is going to happen, I think there's 100 to 1 that should be 10 to 1, or 10 to 1 that should be 100 to 1. If you can find a way of quantifying that probability a little better, then that will put you in a better place, whether you're a compiler or a better, that you will be able to quantify your feelings with some cold, hard common sense, which we could all do with from time to time.
That's a great answer, Jonathan. Thank you once again. It's very rather than inspiring, it's very profound, and I think it's a great advice, a great piece of advice for us all.
And it's taken a long time, by the way, for me to appreciate that, and also appreciate the value of just working hard at what you do. I've met a lot of people that think they're really good at what they do, and they may or may not be, but actually I found the key to success is trying to take on board as much as you can in terms of skill set, in terms of information. You know, if you're going to part with your money, whether it's your own money or the money of a company, you want to satisfy in your own mind that you've turned over every stone you could possibly do. And if you've done it and you have your bet and it wins or it loses, you should be happy either way, because you've done as much work as you possibly can. So that's what I've tried to equip people with, the ability to rationally account for what they're thinking. And I would say when I was in my 20s, I didn't have that skill. I thought and felt about certain things, usually boxers or snooker players or something like that, but I couldn't really quantify it in price terms. Now I think I've got a pretty good idea of how to do that. And I think that's what makes a better odds compiler. Yes, feeling is an important part of it, and we still are able to feel reasonably confident about a price, but being able to bolster that feeling with some common sense is a good idea.
I'm not sure about Divina, but I have a zillion questions here.
Keep going. I'll tell you what I just need is there's some product placement. I'm going to have a drink of Diet Coke.
Yeah, I want tea. I want tea myself. So, I have a question here. It's not related with odds making, but the second one that will come after, it probably is. But I would like to ask you something about market mechanics, because myself, as a bettor, I started as a small modeler, then I shifted to steam chasing. Now I'm really not sure what I am, but in market mechanics nowadays, you see too many prices, too many bookies. Everybody, even syndicates, especially syndicates now, they are offering odd services to bookies. I wonder why. And I think now that everything is well mixed up in the industry, it makes me wonder why still so many bookies move prices on air. And I would like to know an opinion of an expert odds maker when you are watching a screen, knowing that you are not a trader, so it's not your responsibility to level the prices. What do you have to say about this? What do you have to say? The industry has expertise, better data, good odds making, and still we have a big part of industry, a very big part of industry, preferring to connecting to the APIs of bookies that they think are more skilled, and they just move prices on air. Is there any comment this deserves to you? And I know this is a little bit off topic, but it's a very complex.
Yeah, let me try and sum it up. But you're absolutely right. And every bettor out there, whether it's in the UK or Brazil, will have a story about how £5, or I don't know what the currency is in Brazil. What is the currency in Brazil?
Yeah.
It's Brazilian reais.
I'm not going to.
Real.
I'm not going to disrespect. The real. Yes, I'm not going
Yeah.
to disrespect your countrymen by trying to say that myself. But everyone will have a story about how a price moved on no money, or their bet was declined, or something like that. I think it depends where you're coming from, of course, but it comes down to confidence and knowing the value of something. Now, if you're a third party, if you're someone that just wants to exist as a faceless skin, a sportsbook presence that has no interaction with the process, just takes all their price feeds from somewhere else, that's fine. They leave it all up to the supplier. Then there's no need to worry about the odds making process or the confidence level. It's all done for you, and I get that. I understand that. If you're if you come at it from a different viewpoint and you are a bookmaker, you still have to know the value of something. And again, my friend at Labrador said to me, he said, how are you going to take a bet with any confidence unless you've priced it up or know the genesis of that price yourself? If you, we've talked about doing a lot of work, if you've done all the work you possibly can and you've decided, I think this thing is 3 to 1, I'm taking bets at 2 to 1, therefore I have as much confidence as I possibly can in that price, then I'm going to take some bets, and there'll be a limit to which I will go to, because I know I've got positive EV on my side as the odds compiler, as the sports book. All right. Now, if you're a trader, and I speak to traders, and this is why I like educating them, by the way, I speak to traders all over the world, and particularly in Europe, that don't have an investment in the price making continuum. They don't know where that price come from. They don't know that it should be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. Then they're going to react in the way that you're seeing them react. They will move that price on no money because they think money is telling them that they're wrong, and they don't know whether they're wrong or right. So I understand why they do it. So I think, in a nutshell, again, it comes down to, do you have confidence in your price? Do you understand what your product is? And I would say the people that move the price too quickly do not. So that's my answer.
That's once again, it's a very good one.
And as I say, on the other side of the coin, there, if you're a bettor, I go through the same process now and ask myself, have I done all the work here that I think I've got positive EV on this bet? And even though actually I'm quite risk averse, I bet a lot more now than I used to. But even afterwards, I'm still asking myself the question once it's too late. But I've got as much confidence as I could possibly have when I've had that bet as well. So I apply the same process, only in reverse. I try and understand as much as I can about the thing that I am responsible for, whether I'm on the odds making side or the betting side. It just comes down to hard work and understanding the value of things.
I think it's very complex to be sure of the value of things, because when you are dealing with money, and money that sometimes is not your own money, and then if you are in a company, I'm speaking on the trading side now, the trader, he has a boss, his boss knows that, look, you can have the liability that is allowed, it's like X times the max amount, so you have to leverage the positions, and those kind of ones, the ones that really do still have trading inside, it's a very complex equilibrium in the ecosystem. But my question was related to the more mundane kind of thing, because your observation when you are teaching people, you can observe all the ecosystem. And if I can ask you something, please tell those guys to level the juice and don't put all the juice on the overside, on the overside of the coin. But
yeah, I mean, actually, we should have a separate podcast about juice, vigorish, whatever you call it. In Greece, it's ganyota. I can't remember what it is in other countries, but actually, how sports books apply that juice is sort of technically interesting, because instead of it coming by hand, now it comes through models, comes through computer infrastructure, where there are limitations to how you're going to apply it in a way that is computationally quick for your customer and gets to the website quickly. And so I'm currently working with a company called OpenBet that has a certain methodology of applying overround that differs from others that I've seen, and there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to vigorish around the world. No one sat down and said this is the optimal way of doing it, and even if they did, it probably wouldn't in the modern era fit into the computer infrastructures and the architecture that we have. But that's for another day anyway.
Yeah,
I think
if you see this, what you said about the vigors, in the same league, in different matches, the juice is different on all of them. Sometimes it's on the favorite side, all the vig. It's kind of every game is a different game, you know.
Well, if
For
you
the
think
people.
about where that's coming from, most firms now are, let's say they take their feed from BetRadar, BetGenius, or whomsoever. Those feeds themselves will be aggregated from a number of different pricing points, and so it's almost by chance where the vigorish will lie. There's no hard and fast pattern, really. It will be an average of averages, and you'll end up with the price that you end up with, as opposed to when, again, 20-30 years ago, when I had more hair and I was better looking, we'd sit down and think about how we were going to apply that juice in a more manual way. It's done in an automated way now, so I wouldn't have thought there's any particular nefarious tactics at work. It's just the way the computer architecture works these days.
Yes, and as you said, 20 years ago, the juice is a lot of different. It's on a constant change every day.
Yeah, and of course, we can go back to the well, in fact, I'm going to take you back to the 90s, and if you think about soccer, 1x2 in the UK, at any rate, we were betting to about 111, 112%. Now you look at the likes of Pinnacle at 102, 103, or whatever it is. The exchanges are 101 or less, and it's because of the information. As my dear old father said, the more information you have, the more valuable you become, and of course, the better informed we all are. Therefore, the more confident we are in our pricing. Ergo, we can offer less juice because we have less uncertainty, and it speaks of. We were good guessers back in the day, in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, but we had a lot more protection. We had more juice on our side. There were multiple restrictions that we don't see now. Nowadays, there's less juice, but we've got more information to hand. So it's part of the evolution of sports betting, I think.
I think I have one final question besides the one that we always do related to advice for you, to listeners, and I'm not sure if Divino has some more. We have more than 1 hour now, but I have to ask you now, because you opened the door to speak a little bit about juice again, and I need to ask you, do you think, as this is not you can give this opinion the way you want, you can answer the way you want, but do you think with the max limits of the bookies being smaller than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and with the industry, especially Asia, shifting to a more, let's say, commercial product instead of the professional product, do you think our efficiency levels will be shorter because you have small juice, but you have the market and the information shaping the lines. And nowadays, with the limits smaller than they were some years ago, do you believe this can translate into a less efficient market in the future?
So are you saying because of self-imposed restrictions by bookmakers, they're not getting to the truth as quickly as they would if
saying
in a truly egalitarian limit-free market?
I think the efficiency of the market is correlated directly with the liquidity level of that market. That's why English EPL is more efficient than Portuguese Liga 1, because you have more money in the market, you have more information. So money can be translated in information. So with the big bookies on Asia, like SingBet, leaving professional market, Bet365, leaving many countries and lowering the markets. For instance, in England, I was there in July. You were debating the amount of money that you could put in a bookie because of gamble aware protection and all those things. So will it be a less efficient market with better information? Do you see this happening?
I mean, I certainly see it in the non-mainstream sports. I see it now. The market remains inefficient. It's no secret that you can make better margin as a bettor through minority sports and minority markets within those sports, because the market never has the opportunity to become efficient enough. If you look on the exchanges, derivative markets in some of these, well, even actually some of the reasonably big sports, but the sports that I do my business in, there is no money there for a market to mature and become efficient. Therefore, you have to use traditional bookmakers who have lower limits that aren't necessarily bothered about finding out what the true price is. They just want to get through the game, get their bet builder money and be off. So as a bettor, that's where you should be concentrating. I don't think you're going to come up with a situation where you find an efficient markets in all sports and in all products, because there's just too many of them. But I think by and large, soccer takes 70-80% of our sports betting product. That will remain highly efficient, because by the time it gets to the sports book, it will have been rinsed through Asia. It will have been rinsed through the B2B, the suppliers like BetRadar and so forth. So there is no value for the bettor there in the core markets in football, because they've had enough time to mature. So if you want to give yourself a good chance of making money as a bettor, look somewhere else. But we can argue all we like about this, and when I meet the elder generation, which I am now, at these trade shows every year, and I saw a few of them a couple of weeks ago at ICE. We can all wish for the old days, but they're not coming back. The industry is what it is, and you either adapt and move on, or you get left behind. And I've been lucky enough that I've been able to adapt, because I thought I saw the direction in which the game was going. I thought I need to understand a little bit more about maths, a little bit more about modeling, computing, to go with my educated guesswork, and it's sort of paid off. So we are where we are, as somebody once said. So we're not going back there. But I think you're right. We shall see. We shall see. You had another question, didn't you?
I have one final question. I'm not sure if Divino, do you want to ask anything?
No, I want to put something here to complete your question and his answer too. It's because the low limits on some kind of leagues, like I don't know, fourth division from Brazil or from Portugal too, it's correlated to liability too, right? Because on mostly of these games, all the money is on one side. So the VIG don't protect the bookie from this kind of risk, you know. So when you get some, I don't know, England Premier League, Spanish La Liga, you have money from both sides. So the liability of the book, it's more balanced, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of truth in that, although I can assure you, even in EPL or all the main leagues, if you get all the favourites winning, doesn't matter what price they are, the bookmaker will have lost money. And it does, and because punters, bettors are generally not price sensitive. Even now, punters love a favourite. I can remember working in Ladbrokes in the early 2000s, and we had the internet was getting going. We had shops, obviously, a couple of thousand shops, and we had a call center, telephone betting center, all in the same building. And we'd be watching Sky Sports, and when Manchester United score, you hear an enormous roar go up from the telephone betting center. All the people watching the game are cheering, the favorite, and you would just know that the company will have lost a fortune there. But that's the nature of most bettors. They love a favorite, particularly in soccer. So the VIG isn't necessarily going to protect you in situations like that. The reason there's more VIG in Portuguese League 4 as opposed to EPL is, again, about information. I go back to that. Information and confidence. One provides the other. We don't have as much confidence in Portuguese League 4 as we do in EPL. So yeah, you're sort of half right. But VIG is not going to protect you when all the favorites win.
And
I like
another thing about that too is because when you think about the favorites, they receive a lot of money instead of the positive spread, you know.
Yeah, and actually,
always.
It's something that crosses the mind of the investor and the board level directors when they think, hang on a minute, we're offering these bet builders these same game parlays. What happens when Messi scores a hat trick and whatever, I don't know, he's playing in America now, isn't he? Inter Miami wins 7-1 with 20 corners and 10 book, with that Black Swan event. That hasn't happened yet, or maybe it will happen one day. Bookmakers got great positive EV, but it doesn't matter because the punters love a favorite and they love things to happen as opposed to not happening. That will happen one day down the line. And because we had a good example of this. Crikey, it's nearly 30 years ago when Frankie Dettori rode all 7 winners at Ascot, so a 7-time accumulator, same jockey, cost the industry an arm and a leg. Was it good EV for the better? No, it was not. It didn't matter though, did it?
Yeah. But it's not an odds making problem, it's a trading problem. The problem is in the trading room. They didn't manage the liability.
You can't get out of the way of those liabilities. I mean, in bet builders, certainly, because they mount up frighteningly quickly because of the low stakes, high return, and they're very difficult to track. You can't mitigate against them, and actually in most people's operating system architecture, you can't actually see what the very worst result of Neymar, Messi, Ronaldo all scoring all at the same time. You can't tell that's going to cost, whereas in simple things like 1x2 you have a pretty good idea of what liabilities you're carrying.
Yes, on the first, I guess the second episode we recorded here on Sharpcast, we interview the guy who was making for this kind of score goals, and he confirmed to us that it has a huge VIG on it, on this market, because it's really hard to specify for the bookie,
Yeah, who was that, by the way, just out of interest?
It was Jivan.
Jivan's good friend of mine. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. A lot of time for him, and I send him good wishes. I wish him the very best. Yeah, lovely fellow.
Yeah, it was a nice podcast too.
Yeah, he talks very well as well. I like listening to him as well.
Jonathan, you have given many advices, precious advices. I don't dare to ask you at least not in record, maybe off air, I can do 1 or 2 questions if you allow me to. But
well, I'll come back. I'll come back for a part 2 next year if you'll have me. Nothing will have changed. I'll have a bit less hair, a bit less money, and I'll be a little bit older. That'll be it, really.
No, but if you could give an advice to the Brazilian audience, or talk to a younger self once again, not thrilling to be an odds maker, but to be a professional bettor or aspiring to, now it's the chance.
Yeah, I mean that's a good idea, and of course we all wish we were a little bit younger. And I say to my children, okay, I'm going to give you 3 bits of advice. One, I think I've already done, in so far as you should work really hard at your chosen topic for all the reasons I've given, because the harder you work, the better you're going to get at anything in life. I do other stuff outside of betting and odds making, and there's a definite correlation between hard work and being good at something. All right, so it's not very glamorous, and people get the wrong idea about sports betting. If you want to be good at it, you've got to work hard. That basically revolves around information and so forth. Point number 2 is sort of implied in 1, and it's the bit I understood more as I got older. Understand probability, understand mathematics. It's not actually that difficult, and the people who I work with and for now, who do not understand it and think that odds making and betting is a dark art, actually it's not that difficult. If it was, I wouldn't be able to do it, because I'm not a particularly bright fellow. All right. And I think thirdly, and we've spoken about this already, understand that your success, whether you're an odds maker or a bettor, is measured in the long term, not the short term. So you can go to your friends in the bar or wherever and say, I've won this amount of Brazilian real or pounds because of this, that, and the other happened. Actually, when we come up with predictions and prices for a sport, we are basically saying, what do we think will happen in the long run? All right, what's going to happen on average? What is our best estimate given all the information we have? And you can't make a definitive answer on the basis of one match or one bet. You've got to repeat the process thousands and thousands of times. All right. So if you are betting, know, my friends in Brazil, that it is a long road. Those sudden runs of success that you have, that you think are down to great skill and ability, they will invariably be followed by similar runs of failure, where you might reasonably say to yourself, actually, I'm no good at this. Well, actually, both of those things may not be true. The margins you're going to make are going to be small. You need every advantage that you can get, and so you need hard work to maintain them. So it's not very glamorous, but know that trust in your process in the long run and not the short run. Now, I'm going to add a 4th point on here, and this is speaking from a position of experience, is I wish I'd have taken more chances in my professional career, because as I got to the end of it, I took a few more chances, but I'm running out of road. So I would say to the younger people, if you get an opportunity, whether you're on the betting side or on the operating side, on the on the industry, to work in the industry, then do it. Take that chance, because your professional life is quite short. In sports betting, it goes by very quickly indeed, and you don't want to be left thinking, what if? And I'm just getting to that point where I'm thinking, actually, what if I'd have done this? I've only got 3 or 4 years left. But so I say to my children, actually, yeah, take a chance. All right, you only live once. If you get presented with an opportunity that has an element of risk with it, yeah, give it a go. All right, but prepare yourself as best you can, and that would be my advice for the younger generation. direction.
That's a great advice. Do you want to is your company where you're working give courses? If someone in Brazil wants to work with you, how can they do it?
I don't like to. This is why I'm surprised you heard about me, because I don't really like to advertise very much, because there's something a bit unseemly about just showing off. I'm not a showy off type of guy. I still run my own training courses. When I set them up, actually, which was in 2015, I thought they were going to be for companies, and by and large they have been big commercial organizations. I'm not going to mention the names, but both on the supplier and the sportsbook side have bought into either face-to-face training where I go around the world teaching people, or my online training courses. But there's another section of the sports betting community, which are the individuals, and they've contacted me and they bought courses. And by the way, I offer big discounts to individuals because it was only ever meant to be a commercial venture. I know how important money is to the young people and to people with not a great deal of income. So if they want to get in touch with me, I just like helping people nowadays. Business can pay for itself. Individuals are great, and I've got about 5,000 students now all over the world. I go to Europe a lot. I was in Greece last week, just meeting people who I have taught, and it's the best thing in the world. It really is. I hope, I think it's this year, to come to Brazil, because SBC are running some Latino American conference. There's one, I think there's one in March, but they're also doing a LATAM in, it might be Miami or somewhere like, or it might even be Rio.
Yeah, it's in the beginning of March.
Yeah, I'm good friends with Rasmus, who runs SBCs, and we do a lot of work together. So I'd love to come down to see how things are going in Brazil. But yeah, I still teach. I still build trading tools, models. You know, there is a commercial element to it, but I like solving problems because, yeah, I'm good at it. So there we are. That's my bit of boastfulness over for the interview. But I'm wishing everybody down there good luck in this new era of sports betting in Brazil.
Just for the record, it was absolutely lovely chatting with you. Thank you very much for the knowledge you've given us and the time you've given me, especially. I'm really happy with this conversation, because we touched bases, we touched deep concepts, and I think I am richer now than I was when I came here. So I thank you, Jonathan.
Well, it's a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to meet people around the world. I've been ever so lucky in traveling and meeting people that come at this industry from different viewpoints. And if there's one thing that teaching tells you, is you never stop learning of other people. So I'm very grateful to that. Muito obrigado, and até logo.
Então, pessoal, esse aqui foi o nosso 15º episódio do Sharpcast. Espero que vocês tenham gostado aqui, na presença do Cheque aqui na entrevista com o Jonathan, né? E nos vemos no próximo episódio.